Friends, welcome back to the channel. Here we are in the chicken run. I'm sitting on a pile of rotting black walnuts in here with the chickens. They're poking through trying to get the husk maggots out. Anyway, it's early October here and I wanted to make an update on how we are processing black walnuts this year. It changes a little bit each year. We kind of continue to tweak the process of how we do it. And like I said, I want to share it with you guys here. So I've already collected all of these nuts and I've kind of amassed them in a pile. The chickens have done a nice job flattening it for me. It was a big pyramid when I originally put it in here. All of these walnuts come from one walnut tree. Let's see if we can figure out where this walnut tree is at in my background. It's back this way. Can't really see it from here. But there's 4 walnut trees back in there next to the house, and one of them specifically makes nuts that are far superior to the most of the walnuts on this landscape. Now, last year was the first year that I ate walnuts off of that tree, and what I noticed, I was told by apparently the previous landowner said that these walnuts are better than the rest. We didn't really know what that meant or why. In cracking them open last year, what I found is that the size of the nut and the thickness of the shell are pretty average. But when you crack the nut, it's pretty easy to get whole quarters to fall out of the crevices of the shell. And so that's really nice. You can just crack the nut and get 4 pieces pretty reliably, sometimes 2, and you have to crack the next piece a little bit more, but it's easy to get nice big chunks. And the taste was on par with other black walnuts, that good black walnut taste. Now, last year was a rough year. We had a drought. It was not a good year for walnuts generally. I mean, there was only a handful of trees that made any nuts last year, and those that did, this good tree was one of them, but it didn't make that many. This year is a good year for black walnuts. It's been incredibly wet. Most of the black walnut trees around here are loaded, this tree included. But this year its nuts are significantly larger than they were last year. I'll try to do a side-by-side comparison here at some point in the video. And so that's been an interesting thing to say this year. Wow, these nuts are actually large. And not just the nut, I've cracked these open and the actual nut inside is bigger, the shell is bigger, the husk is, it's just all bigger this year. So anyway, knowing that this tree has these improved characteristics that we like, I'm focusing all of my gathering effort on this one tree. So I went and swept the ground pretty clean with the little black walnut. The Nut Wizard is the black walnut collecting tool that I like to use. We'll show that on here. We've shown it before. So we just picked them all up, gathered them here into a pile. The reason they're in the chicken run, twofold. I wanted to let the husks rot. We got some rain lately. I wanted to let them get nice and wet and start breaking down because it makes it easier to extract the nut out of the husk. Also, most of the time, inside of the black walnut husk, let's see if I can find one, there will be husk maggots. I haven't seen as many husk maggots as I normally do this year, which is interesting. Let me see. Here's a few maggots in here. See this guy right there? That is protein and fat for the chickens. They can also eat a little bit of the husk, and potentially that does a little bit of deworming for them because the husk has somewhat of an antibiotic effect or impact on, well, just on the gut of the chicken and also on the soil a little bit to some extent where it's dropped. Now, this antibiotic property of the black walnut husk, the compounds that make it antibiotic, they degrade pretty readily in nature. See, there we go, getting at the maggots. Exactly what we want to be happening. So I don't worry about the impact to the soil or to the chickens that much. This stuff, the husk breaks down. It actually composts really well. It's a good, relatively high nutrient ingredient in compost. Look, there's a maggot here. You want that, ma'am? Yeah, pretty nice. Look, there's more right here. See that? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna put that right there. Anyway, the nuts can continue to age. They'll be totally fine. The nuts are not impacted by the husk rotting like this at all. It has no, at least in my experience, no impact on the quality of the nut. Chickens are picking through, and then we've tried a lot of different ways to process these black walnuts over the years to get the husks off. I'll throw some footage on screen of using what the most common method that I have used is water and a bucket and a paint mixer with like a heavy duty drill. You just beat the snot out of the walnuts, and the shells swirling around with that paint mixer, it basically turns the husk into a slurry. You can just pour all of that off. And that method works good. It's a little bit labor intensive. We've also tried, my friends Dean and Nell, they built a pretty neat black walnut husking machine out of a motor and an old tire. That thing's pretty cool. It's very efficient labor-wise, but it makes a lot of mess to clean up in the driveway. And it was relatively affordable to build. So certainly you can makeshift cobble together a black walnut husking machine if you're mechanically inclined or if you know someone who is. But what I'm really moving to is I like to just let the nuts rot, and then I'll just stomp on them with my boot and go in with my hands and get the nuts out of the husk that way. I find it soothing. It's a little bit less labor intensive compared to the bucket method. The nuts tend to come out pretty dirty. I'll show you right here. So we're just sitting here. You know, the nuts come out pretty dirty. And folks, if you're doing this, you will get your hands stained. The stain sticks around for a long time. I don't mind. I actually kind of like the stain. It's a cool color. It feels like my hands have been in the dirt all day. But yeah, wear gloves if you don't want to get stained. But see, the nut is still pretty dirty. And this is not going to hurt the nut, but if you want to bring these inside, it can be a bit of a mess. So what I like to do is stomp on them all, and we'll do this all together, and we'll take you along for the ride in this video. But stomp on a bunch of them, get the nuts out, throw the husks in a pile for the chickens to go through and make compost from. And then we'll take these, we'll put all of these nuts without the husk into a bucket of water, hit them one time with the paint mixture and the drill, and that should clean them up pretty good. Alternatively, you could use a pressure washer to get these cleaned up, and that's just going to cut down on muck and dust that you might bring into the house when you put your nuts up in storage. Now these walnuts are definitely ready to get out of the husk. They can sit here a little bit longer and it's no big deal, but they definitely could come out now. They could have come out a week ago too. They're ready as soon as they hit the ground, really. And if you have to, look at all these maggots. You can pick them a little bit early off the tree if you need to. I never have, but if you're in some sort of situation where you really want seed, maybe from some specific tree, you can pick them a little bit early if if you grab it and pull it off the tree and it comes off relatively easily. They are ripe enough. Definitely easier to just let them fall off the tree though. But we're not going to process these tonight because I've got some other chores that are a little bit more urgent on the farm here. We're going to take care of those whenever, hopefully tomorrow morning, but whenever I get around to husking the rest of these, we'll sit down, I'll set up the tripod, and we'll keep talking about the process, what we do with them after we get the husk off. The drying and the curing is very important, and also how we crack them. That is honestly, I think, the most challenging part for most people. The husks are labor intensive, but the cracking takes a little bit of muscle memory is mostly what it takes. It just takes some time figuring out the efficient ways to get the nut out of the shell. But I want to encourage you, it is doable, and it's doable, but not all walnut trees are created equal. So this tree makes really nice walnuts that are easy to crack. A lot of the trees you'll find in the wild will be, sometimes they'll have small nuts, or the shell will be excruciatingly hard, or what I find most commonly is that the nut is a reasonable size, the shell is a reasonable hardness, you can crack it, but it's challenging to get large pieces out of the crevices of the shell. That is what I find most common in black walnuts. And those walnuts will still feed you. They will make you work a little bit harder, but they will feed you. So they are valuable. But again, if you can find an improved tree, it can greatly improve your experience with black walnuts. And now you can go and get grafted trees. You can plant grafted black walnut trees. You can plant seedlings of improved walnut trees. They'll take a number of years, typically 7 to 10 years, to start producing nuts. So that's a bit of a long game. But you can, if you're interested in this, you can start planting those trees. You can also go out and look for them in your landscape. This one I only found because I knew I got a tip from the previous landowner that was a nice tree. I have, on my own, discovered a few trees kind of in the wild that are better than average. They're not quite the same quality as the named cultivars that I've tried, but they're definitely better than the average. And so I just want to encourage folks, get out there, start looking, start evaluating these black walnuts. You might find improved ones in your area. And also, it's really just important to remember and to emphasize that these improved black walnuts, for the most part, these are a legacy of indigenous agriculture on this land over thousands of years, many, many generations of people in relationship to these trees, in relationship to the land and all the other forms of life around, has led to these improved trees. We've made some modest improvements as European Americans over the past 100 years or so, but we've also lost a lot of these trees through colonization. So it's important to celebrate what's left, remember where they came from, and I think the future is pretty positive for the black walnut. They're definitely, I think, on the comeback right now in terms of popularity and the number of people willing to work with them. And so I'm excited about where black walnuts are going, but it's important to remember how we got here. All right, a few quick things that I think are worth mentioning. One is that the chickens did a pretty good job, actually, of breaking a lot of these walnuts down as they just kicked through these. They've been in here probably for about a week or so. And in the middle, there's tons of walnuts that just have no husk left. The husk is just totally disintegrated between natural decomposition, the grubs, the bacteria, and the chickens kicking them around, pecking at stuff, eating stuff. So that's pretty cool that some of this has been passive. As we get towards the edge, there's not as many walnuts out of the husk. These ones on the edge, I have found they're starting to dry down. As the husk dries down, it becomes more challenging to get off of the shell. So I'm glad we're doing this today. Probably it would have been best to do the outside a few days ago when they weren't as dry, but it's not the end of the world. They're still coming off easy. But as they dry down, it just, in my experience, it can get more challenging. So we're gonna go through, I'm gonna get as many as I can out of here the easy way, and there's still some husk, and you can see towards the middle, even though there is husk, this is much more moist. I guess I don't know how well that's coming through on the camera, but where it's more moist, they just disintegrate very easily. Lots of grubs, lots of feed for the chickens in here. They are thrilled to be hanging out with me in the walnut pile, but I gotta get back to it. We got a lot of these to sort through. Came down to move the trailer into a better spot. Look, we gained a friend. What's up, my dude? How we doing? Yeah. All right, we're just gonna lower this down, boy. All right, here we are in my mess of a driveway. We've got some walnut buckets that we need to get processed. I want to talk a little bit about this part. Now, you see, we got the husks off. We got the majority of the husks off. And as I mentioned, it's ideal that once the husks off, you dry the nuts pretty immediately. I didn't do that. I got busy. So it's Wednesday. I don't remember exactly what day we dehusked these. I believe it was sometime over the weekend. So it's been at least 4 days that these nuts have just been sitting in this bucket. They look basically like this. Now we can see there's some mold starting to develop. They are drying. This part of the husk that's still attached is pretty dry and clinging on there, which is gonna make it a little bit more challenging to do the final clean. A lot of the times what you'll see as they dry is this yellow, sometimes a blue, sometimes a white mold. I believe it's a mold, maybe some sort of mold or similar organism is growing on the remaining husk material. It's not eating the shell. This is typically only eating the husk. Now we could have taken all these nuts in this condition with still some husk clinging on. We could have taken them and dried them out in the sun or in a garage with a big fan, somewhere where there's good airflow, lots of evaporation happening, and they would have been fine. The problem is if you dry them in this state, which again is kind of hard. Let's see if we can focus in on the nut here. As this dries, because there's still so much husk on it, it's going to create a lot of dust and debris in your house. Anytime you go to move the nuts, to crack them, there's going to be a lot of dust, particulate, husk particulate coming off. So I do like to get them cleaner if I can. And that is what this step is all about. So we're gonna use the drill and the paint mixer bit, as you can see right here, and a bucket of water. Now, if you had a pressure washer, you could lay these out flat, maybe on a grate, maybe like put them in a cart like this or something where you can pressure wash them. The water will flow right through. That is an option. My pressure washer is broken right now. So we're in my messy driveway. We're gonna make it messier by mixing these nuts up with something I think worth mentioning. Look at my hands. This is after sticking them into that juice, that husk mash, multiple times today. I was really in it for like at least an hour, totally covered in it, not stained. And I think what I've noticed, I've really tried to pay attention to this year, because I did get really stained earlier in the season. And I think it's just as the husk breaks down, so the darker color that the husk gets as it turns black, as it decomposes, I think it's the potency of the staining, capability of the husk decreases. So when the husks are green and fresh and you squeeze them and they're all juicy, they will really stain your skin. But as the season progresses and they turn black, the stain seems to not stick to my skin. And it's the same thing with, let me flip the camera around. Same thing here. All I did was rinse this off with a little bit of water and no evidence of the stain. So something to think about, keep in mind. Noticed this area is typically full sun, but because we're later in the season, the sun is so low in the horizon. I don't know what you guys can see with all that blinding rays. This is not in full sun all day, but it does get morning sun, which is nice. And a lot of these walnuts are looking pretty good. What I'm looking for here, sorry, we weren't focused in. Look, there's very little husk material left on a lot of these, so the pounding them with the drill does work. It does take some time, but it does work. Like I said, a pressure washer would also do this. This one is wet to the touch on one side. Some of these, like this, is still wet to the touch on one side. And so what's important with this method is that you come through, every day or a couple times a day and kind of move them around so that all sides get to dry. It's really best if, as you take them out of the bucket, you rinse them off with the hose somewhere where the water and the pulp can drain through. I didn't have that set up. I just piled them all in here in the cart. So it was hard to get them all fully hosed down the way that I wanted to. And you can see there's a lot of remnant husk material, which will hold moisture, right? And that's just sitting on these wood chips. So I think what I might do is I might get the stone rake. I might just do it by hand, but I'm gonna rake these walnuts onto these drier wood chips, get them off of this pulp. And all we're going for is I want them to be dry enough to the touch. I want there to be no detectable moisture on the outside of the shell. And that's when we'll put them up to put them in storage or to cure, to continue curing with a fan inside the house. Normally, I would have done this on a tarp. I would have dried them out on a tarp or like a grate, dry them in the cart, that sort of thing in the sun. The thing is, I didn't have a tarp free at the moment. The cart was sopping wet. So we're doing it on these wood chips. I figure at least the wood chips drained water. And one other thing I want to mention is it's good to have the morning sun. I brought that up because we actually are still getting condensation or dew overnight. And so the walnuts are wet in the morning. They've been wet all night from the condensation. It's good to get that morning sun on them. Zap that off pretty quick. See where I've started to move things? I'm going to just come in and keep moving them around, Beautiful fall day today. Now we've had the walnuts outside drying for I think 3 days, 3 nights, and we decided yesterday was the time that they were ready to come in. And I was going to show that on the video, but we had a longer than expected day. It was a great day, but we went apple picking. We went and picked up a brush hog out of town, so we were gone for most of the daylight hours. We got back and it was dark. It was supposed to rain. Today is Sunday. Yesterday when we got back, it was dark. It was Saturday, and we knew rain was coming today. It's been a little bit unpredictable, and actually it's almost 2 o'clock and it has not rained yet. As you can see, it just looks cloudy out, so we could have left the walnuts, but knowing that rain was possible today, last night was the time when they had to get picked up because they can form some condensation overnight. We didn't want that, if we had to pull them this morning right before the rain might have come, they would have had some of that condensation on them. They wouldn't have had time for that to fully dry off. So we collected them last night and it was dark out. We couldn't really show that. I guess we could have with flashlights, but it was dark. We were tired, long day. So we got them in. I want to show you what's happening now inside of the house. So things are crazy inside of my house right now. Hi, Willow. And it's nutty in here. I mean, just in the living room situation alone, that's full of hazelnuts that are drying. These are all bitternut or yellow bud hickory nuts that are going to go to the Asheville nuttery. They're pretty good and dry. They've been on this table for a number of days, probably a few weeks at this point. But we have the black walnuts in here just stacked up, and you can see they're pretty clean. They're dry to the touch. Hey, Willow. Hi. How you doing? Yeah. Willow's my inspector of this whole process. She makes sure that the nuts are safe from mice. And we're just using these produce crates that we use for all sorts of stuff. And yeah, they can get good airflow. There's this box fan blowing air. I've also got some corn on the other side of this that's finishing drying. So there's just a whole lot going on in this living room this time of year. It's just nuts everywhere. There's squash seeds right here drying out. It really just feels like a farmhouse. But you gotta make sure, you wanna make sure they're dry and not moldy before you bring them into the house. So that's why we had them out there in the sun for so long. Or at least outside the sun is not quite as important as the outside, just ambient airflow. A lot of wind, a lot of potential for evaporation of moisture on the nuts. But yeah, so they're nice and dry, bringing them in here, but we want to keep, I say we're going to keep drying them. Really, this, a lot of folks will call this a curing process, right? What we're doing is curing the nuts. And you could eat them right now. You certainly could crack them and eat them. And we'll talk about cracking in the next video. We'll make a follow-up that's entirely dedicated to various ways to crack the black walnuts, because there's a lot to go into there. But you could eat them now. As I've said before, they taste more chemically. They have a different taste. It's not as pleasant as once they're cured. They're also harder to get out of the shell. The nuts are swelled up still. There's a lot of moisture in the actual nut itself. And as they continue to dry down and cure, that nut will shrink as it's losing a little bit of water. It makes it easier to kind of pull it out of the crevices of the shell. There's no exact science that I'm aware of as far as like when they're cured. How long do you cure them for? In a situation like this with pretty good airflow with the fan, I find at least 3 weeks is a good thing to aim for, but you can check them every week. Check them every day if you want. Crack one every day, every few days, and just see. Crack a few maybe to get a good idea, because you might just get one nut that's not entirely representative of the whole here. There's a lot of nuts here. And that's what I do. I typically wait around 3 weeks, and then I start once a week, a few times a week. I just crack a few nuts and see, do they taste good? Are they cracking out well? Do they seem like they still have a lot of moisture? And if you've cracked a few in this stage where they're still pretty fresh, and then you continue cracking them over the course of the next few weeks, you'll start to get a real sense of, oh, okay, this has not changed, or this has changed a lot, and it is now cured. But that's really all it is just curing them, drying them for another few weeks, and around that 3 to 4 week range is usually what works, but you might want to keep curing them longer. I have cured them longer sometimes, or at least left them in front of the fan. I mean, they're going to stay in these bins inside. I'm going to store them in the house here in these bins until I eat them, but they're not always going to be in front of the fan. And so I really consider this in front of the fan with kind of better airflow than just long-term storage without a fan. That's what I'm considering the curing conditions here, is just in front of the fan. Well, friends, that I think is going to wrap it up for this video. We'll make another video soon. Probably the next one we'll talk just about cracking the walnuts, the different methods that I use to crack them, some tips about that. I'll also, I don't know if it'll be in the cracking video, maybe we'll do a separate video just answering black walnut questions. So if you have any black walnut related questions, put them in the comments below. I've gotten a ton of black walnut questions on some of my short form walnut videos recently, so I think it would be fun to do a video that's just entirely about trying to address some of those questions. So look out for the cracking video upcoming, a questions video. We're also very close to, I'm going to have a nursery update video. There's a lot happening in the tree nursery right now that I'm very excited to talk about. So that's what's on the horizon. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, let me know what you think down below. I'll catch you later. On the jungle-own toxicity, allelopathy, however you say that word, there's a lot to say. I just want to add, I made a short video recently where we dumped a ton. Can you guys see what's going on here? We dumped a ton of black walnut husk sludge onto this tomato plant. Didn't kill it. It's been 2 days. And over those 2 days, the lows overnight was in the, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was in the 40s was the low the past 2 nights, which is not good tomato weather. This tomato has been slammed with cooler weather, lots of black walnut husk, and it's totally fine. A lot to unpack. Tomatoes are supposed to be one of the most sensitive plants to black walnut, to the jungle-own. The jungle-own concentration in different parts of the plants varies. I don't believe that the husk is actually the highest concentration of jungle-own. Some studies suggest it might be the leaves or the roots. And another thing that I think is going on here is the husk, as it decays, as it breaks down on the ground, that jungle-own breaks down incredibly quickly. So these husks were probably 4 weeks old. 4 weeks old as in they'd been on the ground for at least 4 weeks by the time that I poured them onto this tomato plant. And so in those 4 weeks, over those 4 weeks, the husk maggots, bacteria, fungi, still wet to the touch. Look at that. They broke down the husk. It's clearly, this does not look like a green walnut husk, right? So decomposition has begun. It's not totally finished, but it has begun. We even poured some on the leaves and really no issues. You can see a little bit of damage here, but nothing crazy. And this, honestly, hard for me to tell if this is frost damage or not. Although, let's say that this might be black walnut damage, where this is kind of curling up and dry here, because everywhere that there's not black walnut, I don't actually see, well, yeah, I don't see any other damage on the clean leaves. So probably was a little bit of damage. All I'm trying to point out is that it's a complex issue. The jungleone content, right, is going to vary in different parts of the plant. It's going to vary over time because as the plant decomposes, jungleone breaks down very quickly. So how close is the plant to where those roots, where the exudate, where the leaves, the husk is, that's going to make a big difference. The species of plant, tomatoes, are supposed to be more vulnerable than others. What it comes down to, as I've said before many times, it's just not an issue in nature. I have never seen it be a problem. The only thing that I think could maybe be a problem is trying to grow tomatoes or potatoes or eggplants, peppers, tobacco directly under a black walnut tree. Maybe you would have some issues. I haven't tried it. It's kind of shady under a tree, so it's not really something that I would be trying anyway. Although I will say, other misconceptions with trees, people think like, oh, the roots only go out about as far as the drip line, as the shade of the canopy. That's totally BS. The roots can go way further than that. They don't go way further than that in every direction. But they can go way further than the drip line of the tree. So you may encounter black walnut roots in your garden, even if you have a black walnut tree way away. But again, I would just say in healthy soils, it's not going to be a problem in your garden. I've never experienced it to be a problem. And I think this hopefully shows at least a little bit of that. But as I've said, it's very complicated. We did not test and prove every possible combination of things that could be going on here with black walnut toxicity. So the jungleone is a real thing. But it's just not really something I worry about. That's why.